What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the surprising reveal of the number 3 team in my 2021 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the Kansas City Chiefs. Before we get started, a quick reminder to please do hit that like button down below if you enjoy the video, enjoy the series. Also, make sure you subscribe so you do not miss our last 2 deep dives, and as we get into our regular season content starting up next week, baby, we have arrived. But really what it comes down to with me for the Chiefs, just compared to our top 2 remaining teams, is I do think they have some more potential areas of weaknesses on this roster, and I just don't think they're quite as deep and well-rounded as our 2 remaining teams as well. But that's really it. I mean, this team is still incredible. They are going to come in inside our last, final, top tier in the NFL, and being the only team in their own conference in that top tier, they should be Super Bowl favorites because they have a better chance of getting to the Super Bowl than anybody else. They're not going to have to beat anybody in this top tier until they get to the Super Bowl. So it's not to say I don't think the Chiefs are incredible, and they obviously have some incredibly high points on this roster as well. So I'm not trying to talk down about the Chiefs. Again, I just think they have a couple more weaknesses, a little bit less depth, and are a little bit less rounded compared to our top 2 remaining teams, and that's really it. But I am going to have some explaining to do because, as I said, this is a bold ranking putting the Chiefs at 3. So let's get into it. We are going to break down the roster. I will point out some of those weaknesses as we go, some of the areas that I am maybe a little bit more concerned than other people out there. But let's start with this team's offseason here that was pretty wild. I don't think I can remember a team in a lot of ways almost overreacting to the one thing that truly cost them the final game of their season, being this team's offensive line. Now, some of this, they didn't have much of a choice. You have Eric Fisher, who is injured, Mitchell Schwartz, aging and injured. So some of this, they had to make some moves, but also just literally using every single resource for the most part that this team had, which wasn't a ton of flexibility, right? They're pretty pushed up against the salary cap, and just whipping darts and missiles at offensive linemen, basically praying that this thing can work itself out. You throw enough resources at something and you hope it sticks. And it better stick, because that's really all they did to improve this team. But as you can see here, the key departures and additions, it's very offensive lineman focused there, as they're going to lose Schwartz and Fisher, who we mentioned. Their starting center, Austin Reeder, also still currently a free agent, but 7 offensive linemen being added to the team, and 7 players with either starting experience or prospects that look to be starters. So you have Orlando Brown to come in as the left tackle to replace Eric Fisher, kind of forces his way out of Baltimore. And in my opinion, the Chiefs did, call it what you want, say I'm a hater, whatever. I do think they overpaid for Orlando Brown. I don't think he's a proven franchise left tackle, and they are now, after trading a first-round pick, and you get kind of pigeonholed into having to pay that player, and he's a player that's been very vocal about wanting to be paid a ton of money as a left tackle. So I do think that was a very risky proposition for this team, but he is going to slot in there. And honestly, you hope he's a better pass protector than Eric Fisher, because I don't know if he's proven to be that. But then you add Joe Thuney, ton of money there, but automatic plug-in upgrade at left guard. And then really Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, total steals in the draft. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you get Creed Humphrey in the 2nd round. What the heck was the NFL thinking? My number 1 center in this class when you consider the health issues on Landon Dickerson. And then Trey Smith in the 6th round. What? I mean, it's reminiscent of some of the moves this team has made, getting a Willie Gay last year, Tyreek Hill. This team's not afraid to take risks. The only thing holding Trey Smith back, and the only reason he wasn't a 2nd round pick, dare I say 1st round pick, was he had a heart murmur or a condition with his heart 2 years ago that potentially was going to keep him out of football. It hasn't held him back for 2 years. I can't believe they got him in the 6th round. They signed Kyle Long coming out of retirement. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. And then they signed Austin Blythe, who was a quality starting center for the Rams last year, and getting Laurent Duvernay-Tardif back, who's had a very poor camp, actually losing that right guard spot out to Trey Smith. But they do get him back, someone that they're still paying a lot of money. So, my goodness, completely overhauling the offensive line. And then there's really not a whole lot else to talk about. They do lose Sammy Watkins, who was, he is overpaid and an overrated player based on his former draft pedigree, but still a guy that was a reliable third option that they didn't really replace here. They do lose Damian Wilson, who ended up beating out Joe Schobert in Jacksonville, but they draft Nick Bolton in the 2nd round. And then they will be losing Bashad Breeland, who was a starting caliber corner for them, but nothing crazy. They did have a nice pickup of Jerron Reed to get another pass rusher on the inside there. And then they pick up Mike Hughes, a dart throw to guy that really struggled in Minnesota as a former 1st-round pick. So there's their offseason. Very, very offensive line oriented, and we'll continue to discuss this offensive line. But let's go ahead and break down the rest of this roster, rank each position group, how they stack up against the rest of the league. And that is going to start with the quarterback, where they are, of course, going to rank 1st in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes is, at this point, the most well-documented, most viewed quarterback in the league. We're all very well aware of what he brings to the table, especially if you're watching a series like this. So I feel like it's not worth spending that much time on it. He is the biggest resource for this team and anybody else. He elevates the offense. He makes incredible plays that nobody else can make. And the scary thing is the stuff in structure has been there and continued to grow for Patrick Mahomes. The only slight knock on him is he's almost a little bit too aggressive, but that's not even a knock. It's just different than other quarterbacks, because you'll take him taking bad sacks or occasionally, chucking the ball up into double coverage, seeing what he can get away with. You will happily take that, knowing that the next drive he's just going to erase that from his memory and lead a beautiful 80-yard touchdown drive and make some of the most incredible plays you'll see. So he is the best quarterback in the NFL, and I think if he continues to refine that balance of risk versus reward, there's no doubt that Patrick Mahomes will finish as the best quarterback to ever play football. So that's really all there is to say about Patrick Mahomes. It's part of the series. It's not even really worth talking about the ultra superstars, because we know about these guys. The purpose of the series is to talk about some of the bigger question marks. So there's Patrick Mahomes. They rank 1st in the league. Their backup is Chad Henne, who had a great moment to help them beat the Browns in the playoffs. He's a decent veteran to keep a game alive like that, but obviously this team's season is over if they have to turn to Chad Henne. Maybe they can be a 10-win team and try to get scrappy, but that's about it. Shane Buechele is not on the active roster. That's another nice thing, is we're not going to have to talk about quite as many players because 53-man cuts have just happened. Shane Buechele was one of those cuts, but I do fully expect him to be a practice squad guy, and I actually really like Buechele to kind of sit under Chad Henne for a year or two, and he was a player that I liked as kind of a career backup type, a very smart quarterback with some mobility, just very serious physical limitations with his arm talent, but I do think he could be a nice, cheap backup for this team for a long time. But let's move on and kind of talk about the rest of this roster. Like I said, there's a few weak points on this team relative to your top team, so I'll point those out, and we'll continue to rave about some of the amazing strengths that this number 1 team in the AFC has. But the running back room here is going to rank 18th for me. I do like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He is an excellent contact balance, 3-down starting caliber back. I do think he has a strong chance of emerging as a top 10, dare I say top 5 receiving back in the NFL. I think they saw so much of Kareem Hunt's game in Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and just being healthy and more time to prove that he can be that player in the NFL. I think that's a phenomenal comp as a guy that can definitely become a borderline top 10 running back, but just like a Kareem Hunt, there are some physical limitations there. He's not a burner, so the odds of him becoming a guy like a Saquon or, Cook, Chubb, it's probably not going to happen, but I have no qualms with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You can debate if the 1st-round pick was worth it for them last year, but they have him. He's cheap. He's great. He's the only reason this team ranks inside the top 20, however, in a league that has a lot of running backs. So Darrell Williams is your backup true runner. I'm not particularly high on him. I don't think he has the juice to be a quality starter. He does bring a physical element to that run game in short yardage situations, and he's decent in the receiving game. But they do add Jerick McKinnon to add a little bit more juice in there if anything were to happen to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And he's a guy that is good for that role because he just can't hold up physically speaking, but he looked pretty quick and explosive in the preseason, just as Jerick McKinnon tends to do. But ideally here, you have a true 3-down back in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. This team has been at their best when they had a Kareem Hunt who they could just totally feed like that. And that's my expectations. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire, if you want to talk about fantasy football, is going to be someone you're very happy to have on your team this year. Now that, Le'Veon's gone and Damian Williams is out of the picture, I know he was last year as well, but Edwards-Helaire also dealt with some injuries. Should be a big year ahead for Edwards-Helaire, and I think he continues to climb and exceed this 18th ranked ranking, but is going to have to prove that as well. But now let's move on to the receiving grade, and this might be the most polarizing group in the NFL as far as high-end talent and lack of depth behind that, because really you look at Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, and that's why this team ranks third in the NFL for receiving talent, which again is what makes this so polarizing, because this is the most explosive, dynamic, uncoverable duo in the NFL. And just like we said about Patrick Mahomes, we know about these guys. They are elite NFL players, top players at their position. I do think Tyreek Hill is, if not the best receiver in the NFL, certainly the most valuable receiver in the NFL. If any team called the Chiefs and put together a trade package including another receiver for Tyreek Hill, I don't think it matters who that receiver is. The Chiefs laugh and hang up the phone because his speed, especially when paired with Patrick Mahomes, is just different. And then you pair an underneath short to intermediate target like Travis Kelce, who also kind of demands, if not a double team, zone coverage shifting his way. So you have to basically choose. Do we want to take away Kelce this play, or do we want to take away Hill? And the Chiefs are as good at anybody as recognizing what you're trying to do and just going to the other guy. So as long as those two are healthy, this is an elite top wide receiver room as a whole, because that's going to open up so much for Mecole Hardman and his speed as a deep threat. Robinson and the way he can work in the middle and basically find the holes that are created by teams focusing on Travis Kelce, or even opening up underneath stuff for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, just as he benefited at LSU with all those weapons there. So it does open things up as long as those two are healthy, but I do think it's worth noting that the second either of these guys get banged up or, God forbid, have a serious injury, this is going to be a significant drop-off because there's just not a huge diversity of depth and weaponry here. Mecole Hardman, I've honestly been very disappointed with his ability to develop here. Of course, you have the speed, and you pair that with Patrick Mahomes' deep ball ability and the way that this team really schemes open, easy touches for Mecole Hardman, and he's going to be a weapon for this team, don't get me wrong. But do I trust him to develop as a route runner and a guy that can consistently win one-on-ones against NFL corners now that Sammy Watkins is gone? I just haven't seen that part of his game, and there's been some really disappointing moments in there when they've kind of had to lean on Mecole Hardman a little bit more. So I think he's a weapon for this team, and certainly worth noting and contributes to this ranking. But that is a major question mark for me as the number 2 wide receiver, because Robinson is a wide receiver 4 on a good unit, but again, kind of elevated by the surrounding situation here. Byron Pringle is interesting, but is he a guy that we're leaning on to reach that level? Probably not. Darius Fountain, someone to keep an eye on, who made this team an uber athlete coming out of, I believe it was Northern Iowa. If my memory serves me right, I think he had like a 45-inch vertical. So he ends up making this team ahead of some other more established veterans and ahead of a 6th-round pick in Cornell Powell, which I think is worth noting, probably going to end up on the practice squad. But definitely someone to keep an eye on with his kind of potential as a go-get-it vertical threat and a physical guy as a run blocker with a lot of size. Surprised to see him beat out Cornell Powell, but that is what it is. I do think Powell gets practice squatted and is a player that eventually hopefully can make this team as soon as, assuming he doesn't get plucked by someone else, but definitely a surprising cut there of Cornell Powell. But around the league, tons of surprising cuts with these receivers. And then you look at the tight end room, of course, Travis Kelce, the best route running tight end maybe ever. I don't know if there's a strong contender for any competition there just from a route running perspective. We saw him famously break Denzel Ward's ankles, who's one of the best man-to-man cornerbacks in the NFL. So his ability to separate one-on-one, his inside-out game is just elite, and you pretty much have to try to bracket him, and trying to do that when you have Tyreek Hill over the top is just, it seriously limits your defensive potential. So you got him. You got Blake Bell's a nice signing. I think he's the best number 2 tight end they've had here probably since Demetrius Harris was playing okay. So it's nice to have a number 2 guy, can go a little more 12 personnel, a good blocker with a ton of size, former quarterback. They're going to do some crazy stuff at some point because they use Travis Kelce at quarterback. Blake Bell, I almost guarantee you Blake Bell throws a touchdown pass this year. That's basically what I'm getting at. They are incredibly creative in the red zone. You have Noah Gray, who I think they see as a developmental guy with similar physical traits to Travis Kelce, is a guy with quickness for a 245-pound tight end. Just completely needs to evolve that part of the game, but I see what they see, the way that Gray moves. And then Fortson, another surprise to make the team. I'm not familiar with him. So then you get the running backs. I do think Clyde Edwards-Helaire continues to grow as a receiving back, and maybe his emergence as a Kareem Hunt caliber impact to the receiving grade, and maybe he continues to develop as a guy that can maybe come out and play more slot receiver and that kind of stuff. That could be a next step in his game that, kind of like Aaron Jones in Green Bay, where you point to and say, well, he actually really contributes as a true wide receiver. That could be an area that really helps this team as well. You've got Darrell Williams, who just isn't overly athletic, especially in the quickness receiving aspect. And Jerick McKinnon should be a nice backup to Clyde Edwards-Helaire and certainly got some explosiveness in the receiving game. So not trying to dunk on the receiving grade. They rank 3rd in the NFL, and it's incredibly explosive, and this is the most fun unit to watch. But I do think the lack of depth is noteworthy, and especially as we go into the future, it's something to keep an eye on as Kelce ages, Tyreek Hill continues to age. When and where are they going to get that, next receiver to step up that really can grow? Because I don't know if that's Mecole Hardman at this point, honestly. Big year for Mecole as far as the future of this team goes. And now we get to talk about this offensive line that is just wild. Again, I don't remember a team just blowing up their offensive line like this. Even the Raiders did it this year, but they kept a couple starters at least. So the Chiefs, literally 5 new starters across the board, and 3 of them are players we've never seen in the NFL, at least week 1. This appears to be their starting lineup with Lucas Niang at right tackle, Trey Smith at right guard, and Creed Humphrey at center. So let's talk about them first, because I just went down that path. Starting with Creed Humphrey, I suppose, who was just an incredible pick in the 2nd round. I cannot believe he did not go sooner. You look at some of the teams ahead of him that could have benefited from taking a player like this: the Rams, the Seahawks, the Packers, who took, in my opinion, a worse center the pick before this. So him as a run blocker is going to be an instant strength for this team. I will say, as a pass protector, he has just had some issues, whether it's having high-end technique or having a great anchor. That is something I think you can point to as a question mark as a rookie, and something you hope is there immediately. But I have full expectations that Creed Humphrey is going to at least play out his rookie contract and be a quality starter for that time. So that's not so much a question mark. But you do look at Trey Smith and Lucas Niang. As much as I love Trey Smith, my high grade on him was really predicated on his ability as a run blocker. And we've, maybe not all, but a lot of us, especially Chiefs fans, will have seen the highlights from Trey Smith throughout this camp. The majority of the highlights I've seen from him, at least, are him coming out, mauling dudes in a double team, climbing to the 2nd level. He has elite athleticism for a guard, and he has the right mentality where he wants to bury you. So I love that about Trey Smith. And he has the right quickness and length to be a good guard here, or hell, he could step out and pull a Braden Smith and play tackle. That is another thing I have said about him, because he has the size to play tackle. So he really was, to me, one of the best offensive line prospects in a very good class. And he falls to the 6th round because of a heart condition. You, of course, pray that that doesn't pop up, but it hasn't for 2 years, and I think the NFL is pretty dumb to be so scared of it. Why not spend a 3rd or a 4th round pick on a prospect like this instead of a guy that, you're going to end up getting cut anyway? So Just another excellent draft pick. The fact that a team like the Chiefs has found value in guys like Humphrey and Trey Smith, and you look at L'Jarius Sneed last year, it's been very incredible what they've been able to find in the mid-rounds. Lucas Niang, they're hoping can be one of those hits. I'm not quite as sure. He's a very unique player. As far as his physical build, he is incredibly strong in his upper body, but his lower body and his footwork and his foot speed was a major concern for me. So it's really going to be how much did he work on that in his season off. I can't remember if he was an opt-out or if he was injured last year, but it looks like he has, for now, at least earned that opportunity to show what he has ahead of a Mike Remmers, who they kind of know what he is. He's a low-end starter, probably a sixth man in a best-case scenario, who is kind of emergency depth there, and he started most of the season last year at right tackle and was fine. But they're hoping Lucas Niang can give a little bit more upside in future at that right tackle spot. He's the guy I have the most worries about. I don't know. That's all I'm going to say there. I don't know. He was a decent third-round prospect, and we'll see. So that's a massive question mark, right? Is the center to right tackle. Now you have a Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, who seems to be coming back from the opt-out very slowly. I know he was working as a doctor in the opt-out season, and I can imagine he was pretty busy treating COVID and potentially doing research or whatever it may be that he was doing, which is, hats off to him. Like, to set aside your football career to help the world, I'm all for that. But it does seem that he maybe was a little bit maybe out of shape, maybe a little light. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But the fact that he didn't win that right guard spot ahead of Trey Smith, who I didn't really mention had some question marks as far as his pass protection technique as a guard coming out, as most rookie guards do. The fact that he didn't win that job is a bit concerning. And then you have Kyle Long, who, he comes out of retirement. I like the dart throw at that, but he has not been able to stay healthy really at all. Counting on him seems like a long shot at this point, pun unintended. And then Nick Allegretti as well as some experience. Mike Remmers can play some guard, so can Austin Blythe. So you have some decent veteran depth. I don't think they're going to be hurting at center or guard or right tackle, but I really don't think those are likely to be strengths from center to right tackle. You look at the other side with left tackle and left guard, it's a little bit more straightforward, right? You have Joe Thuney, who's just a rock left guard. I can't remember if he's made an All-Pro or not, but he's around that level of being, a top 10 left guard coming from New England, makes about $16 million a year here. He should provide an instant rock at left guard, at least one piece that you don't have to worry about. But I'm not even fully concerned that Orlando Brown on this offense is going to be a rock. Orlando Brown is a 380-pound tackle coming from the most run-oriented scheme in the NFL, the most play-action-oriented scheme in the NFL as well. Orlando Brown does not move well. He moves well for a 380-pound guy, but it's not like Mekhi Becton as far as his movement ability. He will lose against speed. It's that simple. And I think it's very fascinating that they gave up as much as they did. They're probably going to have to pay him about $20 million because he's been very vocal about wanting to be that top left tackle. And I have some serious speculation that it's going to work, especially when you pair that with the way Patrick Mahomes plays. He does not make things easy on these tackles. I think you look at Mike Remmers and Fisher and Schwartz, they worked well here because they're really quick dudes. And when Mahomes drops back 10 yards in the pocket, you need guys with really quick feet that can continue to slide. Orlando Brown, when just from a physics perspective, if Patrick Mahomes drops back 10, 11 yards back in the pocket, those 9-step drops that he does, it's part of his game, and I don't think he wants to remove that part of his game because his mobility helps him buy so much time. The second Mahomes does that, Orlando Brown is basically going to get stuck in a foot race with fast edge rushers. That is the opposite of what happened when he was in the Ravens offense where he was going forward most of the time. I have some serious questions about Orlando Brown's ability as a pass protector. Luckily, they get to see what he looks like here before they have to pay him. But yeah, I was not a fan of that move. I'm not afraid to say it. I do think from a run blocking perspective, absolutely, he's a freaking beast. And if he ends up against more powerful pass protectors that don't have that speed, he's just fine. But he's a matchup dependent tackle, and to end up paying him $20 million for a team that is already paying a ton of guys those max contracts, I didn't think it was a good move. I'm just going to leave it there. So the tackle situation is a serious question for me as far as the different pieces they have on the inside. We barely mentioned Austin Blythe, who provides great insurance if Creed Humphrey happens to stink, and he can play guard, where he's played really good football if Trey Smith stinks. So the interior is going to be really solid, maybe even one of the best in the league. But the tackle situation is a significant question mark for me. Overall, that gives me the 15th offensive line, which makes sense. I think the interior is going to be perfectly sound, but the tackle situation, I think, is just going to be average to below average, giving you the 15th ranked offensive line. And despite all those resources, I do think has potential areas of weaknesses. So this is still going to be the first ranked offense in the NFL. Yes, I ranked them third, but I'd be an idiot not to say the Chiefs have the best offense in the NFL. You have the best quarterback. You have the best receiving duo. You have the second ranked offensive coaching staff in the league. And it's not like the offensive line is doo-doo or they have no running game at all. So they do rank as the first-ranked offense in the NFL. That's not a big surprise. And other than the offensive line, there's very minimal question marks on if they're going to sustain as the first offense throughout the season. But I look at this defense now, and that is going to be another area where I have some question marks, especially when you compare them to our remaining teams that just have a lot more talent scattered throughout the roster. And the Chiefs, to me, have kind of that stars and scrubs approach where they're really leaning on guys like Chris Jones and Tyrann Mathieu to kind of elevate those position groups, where they're kind of starting some replacement level starters scattered throughout this defense. So we'll point to where some of those points are as we go here. But let's start with the run defense. That isn't so much an issue for me, but as you'll kind of sense as a theme with this defense, it's just not a true strength. The front is pretty nice. You have Derek Nutty, who is, I would say, in the top 10 nose tackle conversation. He has continued to grow and is a beast. So I'm not so much worried about him, but the depth on the inside, as you'll notice, Chris Jones is going to be making an early down conversion to edge. We'll talk about him in just a second, but it's going to be Jerron Reed, probably as the number 2 starter next to Derek Nutty. He's an interesting play style as a defensive tackle. He is very quick and finessey as a pass rusher. Doesn't necessarily offer a ton of play strength, though, and he has never been a great run defender for the Seahawks, and I think that's part of what they didn't always like about Jerron Reed. So he's fine. He's got some discipline in there, but just not a true strength in run defense. You have Colin Sanders and Tershawn Wharton, who's a little bit more undersized. Sanders as a third guy, you hope he takes a big step up because he has a ton of physical potential, but the consistency has not been there for him. So really 4 deep, and of course, worst case, you move Chris Jones back inside, but he has lost some weight. And Jones has been kind of a boom or bust run defender as an interior piece because he almost defends the run like he rushes the passer, and he just like blows up off the ball and he just goes. And as a run defender, that doesn't always work. You can get put out of position very quickly, and oftentimes you're going to end up a little more upright and lack some of that discipline that I talk about so much. So he's never been a great interior run defender, but just off of his explosiveness and ability to blow stuff up occasionally, he's been an impact. But now on the edge, I am extremely fascinated, and I tweeted about this, but this is eerily familiar to me of Calais Campbell moving from that 3-4 defense in Arizona when he went to Jacksonville and moved to be much more of an edge player. Now, he wasn't a true edge. He would slide inside on later downs, which I fully expect Chris Jones still to do, because I think the Chiefs would be idiots not to take advantage of his ability as an interior rusher. But now playing a run defending role on earlier downs as a Leo or left end edge defender here, I think you see his physical traits help him out much more. when he's going to be seeing tight ends more often, as there was that clip in the preseason where he met a tight end and just decimated him. He's going to be seeing lighter tackles as well, and much less double teams in the run as well. And that's going to really allow him to utilize his physical traits as a guy who's 6'6", lost a little bit of weight, now 300 pounds, which is almost identical to what Calais Campbell has played at throughout his career. I love that comparison, and I think we see a significantly improved run defending version of Chris Jones on the edge. You also don't have to have necessarily the same discipline, because he's going to be able to kind of navigate the play much better and see what's happening much better from the edge than what he would be seeing on the interior, where it gets really muddy and confusing. So I have high expectations for Chris Jones. He grades out as an 86 just because we haven't seen it yet, and I'm assuming things are going to be great. But I think Chris Jones, just like a Calais Campbell or an Eric Armstead in this role, has tons of potential to become one of the best run-defending edge players in the NFL. And then he plays that Campbell, Michael Bennett role where he will slide inside as a pass rusher. But this is very clearly their plan, is to slide him outside, because the edge depth is doo-doo here. You have Frank Clark, who's just kind of like Chris Jones. Like, he defends the run as if he's rushing the passer, full steam ahead. He'll make some splash plays, and he has some size to do it, but he doesn't play with that gap control, discipline, hold your ground style that you hope for in run defense. You have Alex Okafor, who's a little bit better at that, but just not a physical enough player to do that consistently. Mike Dana has kind of embraced that role and did it very well as a rookie. So I actually think we continue to see a lot of Dana, I think it's Dana, on earlier downs, but I do list Frank Clark still as the full-time starter. But Dana might be their for their best edge opposite of Chris Jones. And then Kindo is just kind of a raw uber athlete that I don't know how much we see in his rookie season, especially on early downs. Wasn't a great run defender, but he has the size certainly to develop that aspect of his game. Kind of comparable to Montez Sweat coming out, where he's got all the traits. It's just a matter of coaching and getting that effort and consistency and play strength out of him. The linebacker room is fascinating to me. Heavy expectations for Willie Gay. He was one of my sleepers last year. I said he was going to be the Tyreek Hill of this draft. That was before he ended up on the Chiefs. So year 2 is a big year for him. They no longer have Damian Wilson kind of stealing that job from him, and he was rotating in and out, but looked really good when he was in there, and buzz from him this preseason has been off the charts. So an unproven player still, and a guy that still is kind of understanding the game at that position, just hasn't played a ton of football. But I have serious expectations for Willie Gay. If this team defensively is going to shatter my expectations here, I think Willie Gay is a huge piece to doing that. So big year for him ahead, but just can't grade out all that well right now, especially as a run defender. Just with some of the discipline and breaking down the run and playing with some of the patience, because there's no doubt that he can see ball and hit ball. But then you look at Anthony Hitchens next to him, balanced, jack of all trades, master of none, especially not in coverage, but he's there as your middle linebacker. He'll communicate and get guys in the right position. It's about all you got there. Not a very good football player. Ben Neiman, I do think, is still this team's third linebacker. Nick Bolton's a decent prospect. I was definitely lower on him than most. Some people saw him as a first rounder. I had a second to a third round grade on him, so he fell in right around that area. Certainly not a surefire day one starter. And I haven't heard much about how Bolton's been doing in camp, or if he's the third linebacker, or all that stuff. This team's going to be a nickel a ton, so that spot's not necessarily so significant. But I don't really see him taking Anthony Hitchens' job this season. So that's really it. You have O'Daniel, who is kind of just a special teamer there with Harris at this point. Maybe gets in coverage looks, but it's a decent run defense, tied for 18th. Could be better than that if you get some serious steps up from Willie Gay and Chris Jones really proves to be an elite guy, but probably not going to be a top 10 run defense either. It's just not the best front seven in the league by a long stretch. And it's a fairly similar conversation as we get to the pass rush as well, but some of these guys are more pass rush oriented, so that's going to boost them up to 14th as a pass rush grade. It's going to start with Chris Jones, who I do think still slides inside for the majority of his snaps. I think when this team is in nickel, especially in obvious passing down situations, I do still think Chris Jones is that 3 technique. We'll be curious to see if the weight loss, position change impacts his power. I think it's something to monitor. I think that power rush is such a big part of his game, and you take a little bit of weight off that. Does it cost a little bit of efficiency as a pass rush? Are they doing a little bit of a trade-off? Maybe instead of, 75 pressures last year, are we talking about 68 pressures this year and better run defense? I think it's certainly possible that that's a trade-off that they're making, but maybe some of the quickness shows up in his game and he adds more of a finesse aspect to his game. So could go either way there. We'll see, but obviously he is the second best interior rusher in the NFL, not named Aaron Donald. So that's the sole reason this is a top half in the NFL pass rush, because you got Jarran Reed, who's a decent number 2. You're not going to complain about it, but he's not a true impact player. His sack numbers have been nice, but he's a guy that is a little bit matchup dependent. I mentioned he's kind of a finessey rusher, wins with his arm strength and his quickness, much less than a consistent power aspect. But he's a nice piece next to Chris Jones, and some of those quickness on the inside with these guys will be a handful. So it's not that he hurts this pass rush, but just a good number 2. You have Frank Clark. Who is Frank Clark, man? He's one of the more overpaid, at a time overrated players in the NFL, but now people kind of understand what he is, and I think the Chiefs can't wait to get rid of that contract, realizing that was a mistake. That's really not a controversial statement to make, but he's still there, and he's a good number 2 rusher. He's going to get you probably 55 pressures this year. 8-9 sacks is about what you can expect there. Decent number 2, just like Jarran Reed. He's there. He contributes to this thing. He's not a true strength. He's not a weakness. You wish he was making a little bit less money for his production, but it is what it is. The biggest problem here is Alex Okafor is your number 2 edge player, and there's not a lot of immediate relief there. As you look at Josh Kindo, who's an ultra raw traits-based prospect, Mike Dana's a run defender, and then, maybe you keep Jones on the edge and you move in a Tershawn Wharton, who showed some really nice quickness. But to me, Wharton is going to be kind of a backup to Jarran Reed in this situation. Not a pass rusher. He's a nose tackle. And Colin Sanders, it's just difficult to expect anything from him in, year 3, year 4 for him. Just hasn't shown that growth. So your lack of depth and even the lack of a fourth quality starter here is an eyesore, honestly. If they just had another Jarran Reed, Frank Clark caliber player on the edge there, this would be a top 10 pass rush, but you don't. You have a player in Alex Okafor who can be single-teamed constantly, and even if you leave a tight end on Alex Okafor, you might not be all that worried about it if he's a good pass-protecting tight end. So he hurts this thing. He drags this thing down. It's not that it's a terrible pass rush, especially when you look at Chris Jones being that ultra superstar, but it's not an ultra strength of this team either, like it will be, spoiler alert, for teams like the Packers and the Bucks ahead of this team. But let's move on to the linebacker grade. So they're going to come in 26th, and this is entirely, in my opinion, dependent on what Willie Gay can bring to the table, because you have Anthony Hitchens is what he is. Ben Neiman is what he is. Those guys are low-end starters. Neiman, more of a cover-minded guy. Hitchens, more of a run-defended-minded guy. Those guys ideally shouldn't be starters for this team, which is part of why they rank 26th. Nick Bolton, you hope he can win that job eventually. We'll see. I wasn't the biggest Nick Bolton fan. I think he was my, he would have been my 6th ranked linebacker in this class. So he's certainly a good prospect. And I'm not saying it was a bad pick. I think it was great value and filled a need. I probably gave it like an A. But just a player that doesn't have high-end athleticism, doesn't have great coverage feel, and is a shorter player that can miss some tackles. So he's certainly not a perfect prospect, but you hope that he can kind of emerge as his career goes on, and maybe by the end of the year he's starting. But I just don't have high expectations for him, especially this year. He has potential to develop into a good number 2 linebacker. And then you got Willie Gay, who we just kind of glossed over. But this dude has elite of the elite athleticism. That was part of why he got the Tyreek Hill comps, because he actually fell in the draft because of off-field concerns. Now, his was really all academic, and that's in his past. Obviously, he's a professional football player now. He doesn't have to go to school. So now, in year 2, really taking the reins here, hopefully becoming the true 3-down starting linebacker for this team, and he can start to understand the game better, get used to things, learns by trial and fire and error, and hopefully emerge as his potential, which is a top 10 linebacker in the NFL. His speed, his quickness, and some of his instincts and coverage, and ability to thump as well. He's not a small player by any stretch of the imagination. He is a truly exciting player and could definitely elevate this defense if that big year is in store for him. But that is, at this point, just speculation that it is coming. He has had a great camp, and it does seem like he's going to be full steam ahead. So he's one of the more exciting players to watch, not just on this team, but around the league. But overall, you're going to get the 26th ranked linebacker grade. It is far from a strength, especially at this point in time, not knowing for sure what we're getting out of Willie Gay. And then you get the secondary, where kind of more of the same here. It's not a bad secondary, and it's certainly not a weakness for this team, but is it a true strength to the likes of some of our top teams there with Tampa Bay and Green Bay? I think that's certainly debatable. So you have your cornerback group is solid. You have L'Jarius Sneed, who has potential to be a superstar corner. Right now, I would just say he is a star corner and was a phenomenal pick for this team. The fact that they get L'Jarius Sneed, who can man guys up, has experience playing safety, so he's a smart player with zone and elite athleticism. They get him for free for the next 3 years. It is going to be such a luxury for this team, and I think he only continues to grow as kind of the full-on perimeter starter this year, with some changes here with Breland out and some of that stuff. But you look at Charvarius Ward as your number 2 corner, good, solid starter, very similar to me to what Buffalo has in Levi Wallace, where he's a good number 2 player. Can be a little bit up and down, but you hope he just plays fast and doesn't give up a ton of big plays and isn't a liability for your defense. That's very similar to the way I view Charvarius Ward. He's got comparable length and straight line speed, but not a great corner by any stretch of the imagination. Rashad Fenton is a ascending slot corner. He's got really nice quickness. He's a phenomenal tackler, and is definitely an under-the-radar player for this team to kind of round out a good starting trio of corners. Just nothing elite, right? Barring an uber breakout from L'Jarius Sneed. And then the depth is NFL cornerback depth. It's solid. They've kind of walked into a couple of first-round caliber cornerback prospects, Mike Keyz, DeAndre Baker. You can debate if those guys were first-round prospects to begin with, certainly, but they were first-round draft picks. Mike Keyz ends up getting released by the Vikings. He has really struggled, and certainly a player that has a redemption opportunity and some upside with really good quickness. I don't see him beating out Rashad Fenton in the slot, but he can come in as a 4th corner and be a matchup guy. It's fine. And then DeAndre Baker as your 5th is really good pieces as your 5th. He was good in the one game that he played for the Chiefs last year. So he's an interesting redemption arc story. This team loves those off-field red flag character guys to kind of groom them into a better environment. So definitely not writing him off yet, but ideally they don't have to see a lot of DeAndre Baker. And then Lamons makes it probably as a special teamer there. And then the safety group's very good. It's one of the better safety duos in the NFL, which certainly helps take I would say, average group of corners and elevate this up into a top half secondary in the league. So you have Tyrann Mathieu, who's one of the most instinctive, heady, go-get-it safeties in the league. You will see him out of position quite a lot because he is such a risk taker. This team does love quarters coverages. They'll put him in a cover 1 shell over the top, and just do different things where he is allowed to sort of take risks, and you will see a boom or bust aspect from Tyrann Mathieu, but he does help create turnovers for this defense, which is really something that they eat off of, knowing that if they get a couple turnovers, it doesn't even matter how many touchdowns they give up because it's all about just giving this offense more opportunities. So he's a good fit for what they want, but he's not like a super, reliable safety in the traditional sense of the words, as far as not giving up big plays and constantly being positioned and being a ultra consistent tackler. That's not really his game. Juan Thornhill is a lesser, younger version of Tyrann Mathieu, a guy that played slot corner in college and kind of still learning the different coverages as a safety, but a guy with a ton of quickness and man coverage ability. This is the ideal cover 4 duo because both these guys can convert zones into man coverage very quickly. And he had an up and down year last year, coming off the ACL in 2019. according to him, he just wasn't fully back. So he could potentially be an ascending player as well here. But you see some of the coverage upside in his game. I think it was the Bills playoff game. He looked pretty dang up to speed on this play, at least. He was defending, I can't remember if it was a slot receiver or a running back out of the backfield, or if it was a wheel route or an out and up move. But basically, he had that curl flat assignment, or maybe he was even in a match man situation on this slot receiver, but he shoots down into the flat and really jumps the out route immediately. But it was again an out and up or a wheel route. So the quarterback was anticipating with that speed coming down, there's no way that Juan Thornhill can flip around and cover this up the sideline, and he did, and he picked it off. So maybe he dropped it when he hit the ground, but it was a really impressive play by Juan Thornhill that really epitomized his strength as far as juice, but ability to quickly convert into man coverage. A very, very symbolic play there for his skill set. You've got Daniel Sorensen, who's just a nice chess piece for them. He's a sizey safety. He can play some nickel linebacker for them. He'll play free safety and allow a guy like Matthew or Thornhill to come down and play a little bit more slot corner in 3 safety packages. They do use him a ton, and he's a decent, smart player, just not a great athlete. And then you have Armani Watts, who hasn't had a ton of opportunities to really step up here, but was a interesting mid-round pick, a guy with great ball skills and instincts. They probably see a lot of a guy like Tyrann Mathieu in Watts, who has that kind of aggressive go-get-it mentality. So certainly a unique duo of safeties as far as their play styles, but a good one nonetheless. So the secondary, again, ranking 14th as a whole, it is a good unit, just not a true strength for this team, I would say. And that's really the overall theme for this defense, is just don't suck, right? They rank 19th for me defensively. We pointed out some of those key pivotal players and some potential weaknesses for this team, being that number 2 edge spot, the linebacking group, and potentially the number 2 corner spot. But if a couple of those things break right, if you get, for example, a Willie Gay to really take a step up, or L'Jarius Sneed becomes a Jair Alexander level corner, for example, then you could get up into the top 13, 14, 15 defenses. And with that, if that's as good as their defense is with the number 1 offense, that's a Super Bowl team. So the Chiefs are probably totally fine with this just being an average defense. That's kind of their approach in general. Their defensive coach, Steve Spagnuolo, running that kind of 4-3 split safety defense, ranking again kind of middling for me. Very good, sound, solid defensive coordinator. Nothing more, nothing really less. I do like the scheme that they run because it's a nice balance of keeping offenses off balance and mixing up coverages. They do run cover 4, cover 6, man. They do a lot of different fun stuff. Cover 3 is big here as well. But they're able to get to those coverages in very multiple ways because they are that split safety defense. You'll see Thornhill come down. You'll see Matthew come down. You'll see 3 safety packages with one of those guys in the slot with Sorensen over the top. The way that they use their safeties allows them to mix up their coverages and disguise things really well. But once they get to those coverages, they're very straightforward, and players can play fast and know their roles and hopefully not have coverage busts. So it's a nice system in that way. And of course, the home field is the best in the NFL, and getting that back this year also could make this defense look a little better than they did last year. So they rank 19th for me right now with some question marks and certainly potential to climb a little bit, but I don't see a top 10 defense here. I really don't, and I think the Chiefs are fine with that. Just make some strides on defense, get to the 15th best defense in the NFL, have the best offense in the NFL, win a Super Bowl. That's their formula here, and it's a good one. But just to recap the team one last time before we get into their schedule and my win total projections for this team: 3rd overall for the power rankings, coming in 1st offensively, 19th defense. Special teams ranks 22nd for me. I don't think it's a spectacular special teams. It certainly wasn't last year. They had their fair share of gaffes on this team. I think if you look at their coverage units for kicks and punts, it was well below average last year. Also, maybe a question about who's going to be returning kicks for this team, depending on if they want to keep Mecole Hardman doing that, considering he's their number 2 receiver now. So some questions on special teams, but nothing I'm really worried about. The culture ranks 5th for me, right up there with the best of them. Certainly a team that has earned a lot of benefit of the doubt, drafted and developed a lot of young players here. They're able to turn around some troubled players as well very consistently. So that's a big asset for this team. And then the strengths and weaknesses here, for me, if you want to talk about true strengths, I think it's all offensive minded here for this team. Patrick Mahomes and his explosiveness, Andy Reid being one of the best play callers, most creative play callers in the league, paired with, of course, Eric Bieniemy, who's we didn't even mention here, really should have been a head coach. Him and Brian Daboll, I can't explain it, but these teams retain those brilliant offensive minds. You get an elite receiving duo in here with the uncoverable dynamism of Tyreek Hill and Kelsey. It's insane. That's probably the biggest strength of any team around the league, is just the Chiefs' offensive machine. But I do think there's some holes you can poke to as far as weaknesses as well. I think wide receiver depth, if you had an injury there, you're very worried about what you have. O-line, just 5 new starters. That's really unheard of. There's question marks as far as if that works. It could end up being a strength, or it could actually be a weakness still, despite all those resources they threw around. And then really my biggest concern with this team is their stars and scrubs approach on defense. You're entirely leaning on Chris Jones, Tyrann Mathieu, and then like L'Jarius Sneed and Willie Gay, who are, let's just say, unproven superstars, to really elevate the rest of the defense, because you poke around and it's like no one is really scaring you on that defense. So, you get a little more nitpicky when you get into this top tier. They're top tier teams for a reason, but that's just kind of the final breakdown of the team there. Let's go ahead and take a look at this team's schedule, and it's an easy-ass schedule. I'm not going to lie. They really got a lucky draw with some of this stuff, because most of their difficult games are at home. Green Bay, Cleveland, Dallas, Pittsburgh. Outside of going to Baltimore, they should be able to win all of those road games, and then you're playing at home as favorites behind, the best home field advantage in football next to Seattle. So just by the way we do this here, like, they're going to be favored in every home game that they play. And then your road games, I have them losing at Baltimore and at the Chargers, but at Philly, at Washington, at Tennessee, at Las Vegas, at the Chargers, at Cincinnati, and at Denver. I mean, most of those are bottom half teams on the road. So that is an extremely favorable schedule. It explains to me why Vegas has them with the highest over-under at 12.5 wins. And is certainly going to put this team in a position to get that 1 seed and hopefully go back to the Super Bowl. And then, of course, you get there. Hopefully Patrick Mahomes isn't running for his life this time. I actually think it makes sense that the Chiefs should be Super Bowl favorites, even though I ranked them 3rd. I just think you look at they're a step ahead of anybody in their conference. They have a very favorable schedule. And because of that, they might be able to coast down the stretch like they did last year and get that first round bye and let it roll. So I'm sorry if I offended you Chiefs fans, putting you number 3. Again, I just think a couple more weaknesses you can poke at, a little bit less well-rounded than some of these other teams, but no reason that the Chiefs can't, won't, or shouldn't be back in the Super Bowl this year. Let me know your comments down below what you think. Am I insane for putting them number 3? Do you think you can see some of this? Are you waiting to see what I say about my next 2 teams before you make that decision? All of that, let me know in the comments down below. Please do hit that like button as well. We'll be back in a couple days for our number 2 team. And until then, thank you for watching. We'll see you later.